American national government. This is Dr. Patrick Stewart. Chapter 7 Political Parties. In this segment, we'll be considering the learning objective of defining what the political parties are. So, that's a big question. What are political parties? Well, when we define the United States political parties, we see that the key definition here is a major political party is a broadly based coalition attempting to gain control of the government by winning elections. In other words, these political parties are organizations that nominate and run candidates for public office under its own label. So, if we look to previous classes, when we look at interest groups, we saw that the factions or part of the interest groups were groups of people who joined together on an ad hoc basis to win some political advantage. And that is exactly what the early political parties in the American history were. Now, today, faction refers to a wing that is part of a larger entity. In other words, it's synonymous with a wing or a division of the political party. And you can find these in various different ways, including network analysis of giving, where you see that there are distinct wings in both political parties that show how the party comes together and how it's separate. But still, we want to compare interest groups and political parties. So we know that interest groups do not run candidates for office. They certainly assist them, but they do not run them. Now, political parties run candidates for office under their party label, and they seek to staff government positions by recruiting and nominating candidates for office and work to get their candidates elected. In other words, they're talent finders. They try to find good candidates so they can get them in office. Now, interest groups focus on a narrow set of issues, whereas political parties do not have that capability. They have to focus on a broad set of issues in order to appeal to a broad electorate. Now, finally, when we look at interest groups, they're private organizations and they can restrict membership based upon the income, the professional qualifications, the age, gender, even race of the individuals who might want to join. But political parties are quasi-public organizations, and as a result, they cannot limit membership. And as a result, we might see different political parties having groups that come into them and try to take them over effectively or ineffectively that do not appear to be a part of them. But that's only when the parties themselves are weak. So the next question is, what are the reasons for a two-party system? And we'll get into the structural and historical reasons a little bit more in the next one of the next segments. But if we want to take a look at membership in the U.S. political parties and why we have two systems, we see that there are three component parts. It's also known as the three faces of political parties. The first is the idea of the party in the electorate. And this consists of the ordinary citizens who identify with the party and usually support the party's candidates. In other words, these are the voters and the donors, the individuals who they consider themselves Republicans or Democrats, and they give of their money and at least their time to go to the polls to vote for the candidates. Now, we also have the party in the government. This is obvious. We have the elected and appointed office holders at the national, state, and local levels. They represent the party, and they're some of the most obvious ones because they're up front, representing, legislating, and administering on behalf of their political party. And finally, we have the party organization. And these are the party professionals who hold official positions within the party, and also the other people who are active in running and maintaining the party's organizational apparatus. So they're the individuals behind the scenes. So while they might not be seen as much, they certainly have a major influence, oftentimes because they've been there a long time and do some very important jobs for the political parties. As to what the political parties do, well, there are two different approaches to this. And the first is that of Edmund Burke, who lived in the 18th century, and he said that political parties are a body of men united for promulgating by their joint endeavors the national interest upon some particular principle in which they are all agreed. Now, in other words, the idea here is that a political party is a group that intends to promote the common welfare of all. In other words, it's about policy. And this makes sense because Edmund Burke was a conservative Whig politician in the British Parliament during the colonial period, as you can see. And he believed that they are the rights of the colonies that bore their own power. And he was also very much a supporter in limiting the power of the king. So that's certainly one perspective, and that's, the insider's view, the one who actually played the game of politics. Now, the other comes from Joseph Schumpeter, and he lived in, from 1883 to 1950, so in the last century. And he said that political parties are a group whose members propose to act in concert for the competitive struggle for political power. In other words, political parties are a group whose end is power. Here we see that winning is the most important thing. And then this makes sense because Joseph Schumpeter was an Austrian-American economist who taught at Harvard. And so his perspective was likely premised on the rational act of voting and the idea that it should be for individual gain one way or the other. So when we go back to these basic ideas, we see that we can see it showing up as far as the incentives for associating with political parties. And Schumpeter's viewpoint, that of winning, is best associated with party professionals. Here, incentives are primary material and social in nature. So the satisfaction for being a party professional comes from playing the game of politics and winning elections and getting the power that comes from it. And that makes sense. But the other approach, the Burkean approach, arguably states that policy-motivated activists, in other words, the amateurs out there, they find their incentives primarily based upon serving their principles. When they get satisfaction, it's not from winning, it's from doing the right thing. Of course, this is according to them. And so this means doing the right thing even if it means losing elections. So while there's no one example that is a pure example, certainly these approaches can predominate within different individuals. American national government.